Hello, and welcome to the BodyMetrix Personal Training tutorial. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for your purchase, and we're confident you'll find your BodyMetrix to be a valuable assessment tool. This tutorial is designed to assist you in learning how to use the BodyMetrix and understand all the features of the system and ensure accurate and consistent measurements are taken. From the BodyView Personal home screen, click on Create New Profile at the bottom of the page. Here you can enter a first and last name, birth date, and gender. Next, you'll select the appropriate athletic type from the drop-down menu, non-athletic, athletic, or elite. Individuals who are noticeably overweight or obese should be designated as non-athletic. The athletic setting is appropriate for people that have some excess fat but are in relatively good health, and most people will fall into this category. The elite setting should be selected for those with low body fat, good muscle definition, and they exercise regularly. They typically don't have a noticeable fold of fat you could grab or pinch in the abdomen or waist. Examples include marathon runners, bodybuilders, and certainly people with six-pack abs. If you're unsure of which setting to choose from, the athletic setting is always a good place to start. It's important to know that the athletic typing does not explicitly enter into the calculation of body fat percentage, but rather it's a helpful tool for our software to help correctly interpret the ultrasound signal and identify the true fat-muscle interface. We'll review this in more detail when we discuss how to accurately measure and calculate body fat percent. You can now input your client's height and current weight by highlighting and typing, and also adjust to metric measurements if desired. Once you've entered all the pertinent information, click the Create button. Your profile will now appear on the home page. You can personalize the profile by dragging an image to your profile, and the image will automatically be sized to fit the icon. You can create a total of 5 profiles, all accessible from the home page. Select the desired profile, which navigates you to the measure page for new and repeat assessments of existing profiles. If this is the first time you've started your BodyMetrix device, you will see a message prompting you to perform a calibration. Click on the Perform Calibration button, and the device is now ready to calibrate. Press the button on the device for approximately 2 seconds without the device touching anything. This calibrates your device and lets you know that it's working properly. The measure page will always open with the weight, height, athletic type values, or activity level from the last measurement session. You can easily update and change these values before beginning a new assessment if necessary. The top portion of the screen also shows your BMI or body mass index. BMI is a calculation based on your height and weight, and it can be misleading. For example, a bodybuilder with low body fat will have a high BMI and be classified as overweight due to a higher density of muscle mass. In contrast, a very slim person may have a healthy BMI rating, but have a high body fat percentage due to a lack of lean muscle mass. We all require some fat, women more than men. This essential or healthy fat acts as insulation and protects our joints. The goal is to reduce excess fat and develop lean muscle mass. Measuring your body composition and calculating percentage of body fat provides a better indication of health and health risks, including diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. The BodyMetrix Personal Wand uses ultrasound to take a true measurement of the fat thickness at each site point. By taking measurements at multiple sites, you can easily calculate your body fat percentage. To begin a measurement, select a formula from the drop-down menu. There's a wide variety of choices, but the Jackson and Pollock formulas are commonly used. Generally speaking, the 3-site formula is a good formula for both men and women, and the default selection for both genders. To take a measurement, highlight the first measurement point on the point list, which is the thigh. A description of how to measure the point will appear in the measurement box. Apply a dime-sized amount of gel to the head of the BodyMetrix device as shown. Next, click on the Measure Point button. Place the device on the site point, and without pressing the button, spread a thin layer of gel by moving the device up and down approximately 1 inch. To make a measurement, Press the button on the device and move the device up and down at a comfortable speed, making sure to stay within the 1-inch area for 3 to 4 seconds and then let go of the button. You'll now take a second measurement, repeating the same process by again pressing the button and moving it up and down for 3 to 4 seconds. You're moving the device 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch on either side of the measurement point. This technique is called averaging. Since fat is not an even layer, this technique provides you with an average of the fat thickness at each location and gives you a signal here in the measurement data graph displaying clearly defined characteristic peaks. The first strong peak is generally the fat muscle interface. Next, we'll demonstrate measuring without using the averaging technique. In this example, we'll press the button for a fraction of a second without moving the BodyMetrix device. The resulting measurement data graph shows an unaveraged signal with many fine, thin peaks representing various tissue structures. Keep in mind that the BodyMetrix transmits a narrow beam of ultrasound that detects tissue structure along that beam, so it's very important to move the device and average the signal because it eliminates the fine structures, which are not of interest when measuring fat thicknesses. Averaging leaves you with clearly defined signal peaks and clean interfaces like the fat muscle interface and muscle bone interface. When the two measurements are completed, the fat thickness is displayed here. By looking at the measurement data graph after completing your measurements, the first strongest peak aligns at the fat muscle interface, or the division between the yellow and pink regions. There may be occasions when the software prompts you to take a third measurement because the first two measurements taken disagreed by more than 10%, or the device was not flush and perpendicular on the skin surface. You may always repeat the measurement by again highlighting the site point and clicking the measure point button. Next, click and highlight the chest site point, then the measure point button. It's not necessary to wipe the device clean between measurements, but you may need to add a small amount of ultrasound gel to ensure it slides easily on the skin. Spread the gel within the optimal area and, using the averaging technique again, slide the BodyMetrix device diagonally back and forth 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch on either side of the site point. Repeat the same procedure for the second measurement, and in this instance, the software is prompting us for a third measurement. The fat thickness is 6.3 millimeters, and the first strongest peak or fat muscle interface again aligns at the division between the yellow and pink regions. Next, we'll click and highlight the waist and again select the measure point button. Apply the gel in the same manner as your previous measurements and spread a thin layer moving the device side to side, beginning 1 inch to the right of the umbilicus or belly button. You'll use the averaging technique again, and when you're ready to measure, press the button and slide the device side to side at a comfortable speed for 3 to 4 seconds and let go of the button. Repeat the same procedure for the second measurement and then look at your measurement data graph. Now, this graph illustrates a very important point with regard to the waist measurement. The true fat muscle interface is not necessarily the first peak. Remember that the athletic type settings act as a helpful tool for the software to choose the most likely peak representing the true fat muscle interface and does not explicitly enter into the calculation of body fat percentage. Had you selected the elite setting, the software will automatically choose the first strong characteristic peak in the waist measurement. And this makes sense as elite individuals' fat thicknesses normally range between 3 to 10 millimeters in most cases. In examining the measurement data graph further, the first peak for this waist measurement represents a thin layer of connective tissue within the fat known as a fascia. The fascia separates two distinctive layers of fat within the waist. Superficial adipose tissue, or SAT, is the layer between the skin and this first fascia peak, and the deeper adipose tissue, or DAT, is the layer between the fascia peak and the actual fat muscle interface peak here. In analyzing the measurement data graph, 25 millimeters is a great reference point to consider as it's equal to 1 inch of fat, or a noticeable fold of fat you can grab or pinch in the waist. On the other hand, 8 millimeters is 1/3 of an inch, which is a thinner layer that you could poke possibly, but not a significant fold. In looking at your client's waist, It should be very easy to see in most cases if they have considerably more or less than 25 millimeters or an inch. Using this helpful reference, it's clear that the software did in fact choose the appropriate peak at 13.8 millimeters, the true fat muscle interface for this measurement. The deep adipose tissue is the metabolically active fat, and it correlates highly with chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. With elite individuals, the superficial and deep adipose layers tend to merge together and form one layer. However, as the fat thickness in the waist grows due to a lack of exercise or a poor diet, the fat then separates into two compartments or layers of fat, superficial and deep adipose tissue. The importance of analyzing your measurement data graph is critical to ensure accurate measurement readings in the waist. Now, let's consider one scenario where you set the athletic type to elite, and the software did in fact choose this first peak at 6 millimeters after taking your measurements. Using your reference of 25 millimeters, we know that 6 millimeters is less than a third of an inch of fat, but for this individual it's obvious that they have a noticeable fold in the waist. So the most likely characteristic peak is the strong signal at 13.8 millimeters. Now what you can do is you can manually override the automatic peak detection in the algorithm by clicking on the peak at 13.8 millimeters, which forces the software to use this peak as the true fat muscle interface. There may be instances where the ultrasound signal fluctuates despite having the correct athletic typing, especially with individuals who are extremely sedentary or obese. However, don't panic. You can always override any measurement if necessary, so please be sure to examine your measurement data graph to ensure the appropriate peak has been selected before saving your data. Once you've completed your analysis, the true body fat percentage is automatically calculated and displayed here. Your fitness level will be displayed on the bar graph, your weight will be explained in the pie chart, and recommendations indicated as necessary. Another advantage of knowing your body fat percentage is that you can determine your basal metabolic rate, or BMR. This is the number of calories needed to sustain your current weight while completely at rest. You can further define your caloric needs based on your activity level selection and adjust as needed from the choices in the drop-down menu. To lose weight, you would consume less calories based on your activity level or more to gain weight. The BodyMetrix Personal System allows you to compare previously saved measurement data graphs, a great feature to quickly demonstrate changes in fat thicknesses at various site points. Clicking on the C button below the bottom right corner of the measurement graph brings up a window where you can search the date of interest here on the left from the drop-down menu, as well as the various site points. On the right side of the window, you can select dates and site points to compare the graphs, which clearly show change, progress, or regression in these areas. The top graph on either side represents the first measurement taken, and the bottom represents the second. Now, we'll move to the trends page, which allows you to monitor your progress with weight, body fat percentage, and specific fat thickness changes over time. The data of each assessment will be recorded on the graphs by date. You can adjust the displayed statistics by entering a beginning and ending date range using the drop-down calendars at the top of the page, which show all assessment data during that time frame. By clicking on the plot points in the graph, it will bring up the numeric values. To view a report of your assessment, navigate to Profiles at the top of the page and select View Report. This provides you with a comprehensive report explaining your current assessment with graphs and recommendations, and can be printed by clicking the Print button. Clicking the Show Data button brings up a spreadsheet where all your saved measurement thicknesses are saved for viewing. The final feature of the BodyView Personal software is the Scan page. Ultrasound gives you the unique ability to capture cross-sectional images of targeted areas to track actual changes in tissue and visually see fat loss and muscle gain. It's a great tool which validates your hard work and the effectiveness of your diet and exercise. To start a scan, click on the Scan tab at the top right of your BodyView screen and click the Enable Scan button. Next, apply about a quarter-sized amount of gel to the head of the BodyMetrix device as shown. You can uncheck the grayscale box to render the image in blue scale, which you may prefer as an option. With the arm in a relaxed position, spread the gel from approximately 1 inch above the peak of the bicep in the center of the muscle down to the elbow approximately 3 to 4 inches without pressing the button. You're moving the device up and down to ensure it will glide smoothly on the skin so it doesn't stick or bind. When you're ready to start scanning, go back to your starting point approximately 1 inch above the peak of the bicep at the center of the muscle, press the button, and with the device flush and perpendicular on the skin, slowly drag the device downward in one direction, stopping at the bend in the elbow. The speed you're moving the device is approximately 4 to 5 seconds in most cases. As you do this, you see a cross-sectional picture form on the screen. The left side of the image represents the starting point of your scan above the midpoint on the bicep, and the right side is the end of the scan to the bend of the elbow. In examining this image, we see both white and light blue bands of signal, which represent strong ultrasound reflections or echoes that identify changes within the tissue and occur at different tissue borders or interfaces. For example, the fat-muscle interface or muscle-bone interface. Our primary focus will be on the white bands of signal, and it's important to understand that these bands do not necessarily represent fat, but simply identify a change as taking place there. Once we correctly interpret the various bands of signal, we can then determine the fat and muscle layer thicknesses. Starting from the top of the cross-sectional picture, which represents the skin surface, we see a strong white band here at 5 millimeters going from left to right. This signal separates the fat layer from the muscle, which is known as the fat-muscle interface. You can drag a small rectangle from various points on the signal to the top of the image to see different fat thicknesses throughout the scan, shown here in millimeters. The last white band of signal here at approximately 35 millimeters is a reflection off of the humerus bone and represents where the muscle actually meets the top of the bone or the muscle-bone interface. The distance from the fat-muscle interface signal to the top of the bone gives you the total muscle thickness in millimeters. Now, one of the things you can do is track these interfaces, which allows you to quantify both fat and muscle layer thicknesses. To do this, click on the Track Interface button, and then using your mouse, place your cursor on the fat-muscle interface signal and position it in the center of the signal as much as possible and click. You can adjust the tracking by setting your own data points by moving your cursor to the desired area and clicking again. Once you're satisfied with the tracking, click the Stop Tracking button. Next, you can track the muscle-bone interface where the muscle meets the top of the bone and adjust it as needed. We have now quantified both fat and muscle thickness throughout the entire image. The white signal we see within the muscle typically represents intramuscular fat or other tissue structures such as connective tissue or veins, so you can look at the quality of that muscle as well. There is also a grayscale option, which many medical professionals prefer as it closely resembles an X-ray image. Note that there is an option to adjust the scan speed, and the default setting is at 3. With speeds 2 and 1, you're dragging the device much slower, which can render a higher resolution scan. However, the default setting speed of 3 should be sufficient. The BodyMetrix system allows you to control the depth of the scans, and the default setting is set at 60 millimeters. Depending on how muscular an individual is, it may be necessary to adjust the depth accordingly if you're not able to see where the muscle meets the bone or the muscle-bone interface. You can always adjust the depth and immediately repeat the scan to capture and display the tissue. This is especially helpful with obese individuals carrying substantial fat in targeted areas, or for bodybuilders with extremely muscular thighs or biceps. The 60 millimeter default depth setting is generally fine for relatively fit individuals. The intensity slider changes the sensitivity of the BodyMetrix device, and higher values can be used to detect deeper structures. The default value of 180 should be suitable in most cases. Next, type in the name of the scan, for example, left bicep. These images can be saved by clicking on the Save Image button and then compared to show changes in fat and muscle thickness. Select the Compare button, which brings up a new window. From the drop-down menu on the left, you can select the scan point and then select the date and time of the image you're interested in, possibly an initial baseline image of a targeted area. On the right side, select the scan point and date and time of the scan image you want to compare it with. Clearly, you can see tangible proof of changes in both fat and muscle. This helps to shift focus away from scale weight, as you can actually see progress, evolution, or regression at targeted areas. You can also uncheck the Show Tracks box for either image and use your mouse to drag a small rectangle from the fat muscle interface anywhere within the image to the top, which gives you a fat thickness measurement below the image here. Additionally, you can also look at muscle thicknesses by dragging a small rectangle from the fat muscle interface to the muscle bone interface. Next, we'll discuss how to perform and interpret a 2D waist abdominal scan, along with some other options within the Scan tab. Let's briefly review a waist measurement first to give you some background knowledge that will help you with understanding the different layers of adipose tissue. Remember that the ultrasound signal spikes or characteristic peaks identify boundaries or interfaces between different tissue types. In this waist measurement, the individual has a total fat thickness of 13.8 millimeters, representing subcutaneous fat. Subcutaneous fat in the abdomen can be broken down into two compartments or layers. Superficial fat, or SAT, is a layer between 0 millimeters and this first small peak at approximately 4.5 millimeters. This peak represents a thin layer of connective tissue known as a fascia, separating the superficial and deep adipose tissue layers. The deep adipose tissue, or DAT, is the layer between the fascia and the actual fat muscle interface here at approximately 14 millimeters. With elite individuals, the superficial and deep layers tend to merge together and form one layer. As people become more obese due to poor diet or lack of exercise, what happens is the fat then separates into these two distinctive layers. With the scan feature, we can clearly see these layers and quantify them, as we'll demonstrate next. With the Scan tab open, click the Enable Scan button. Next, adjust the intensity level to 165 if you're carrying excess fat in the waist, as this helps reduce the number of white regions seen, which can be an indication of a saturated signal. The default value of 180 should be suitable for relatively fit individuals. Apply a quarter-sized amount of gel to the head of the BodyMetrix device as shown. Beginning 1 inch to the right of the umbilicus, spread the gel approximately 3 to 4 inches horizontally towards the right side without pressing the button. You're moving the device back and forth to ensure it glides smoothly on the skin without binding or sticking. When you're ready to start the scan, go back to your starting point 1 inch to the right of the belly button. Press the button on the BodyMetrix device and slowly drag the device in a smooth fluid motion 3 to 4 inches towards the right side of the body, making sure the device is flush and perpendicular on the skin. And this should take approximately 4 to 5 seconds. As you're doing this, an image appears on the screen. The left side of the image represents the start of the scan, the same place you would take a waist measurement when calculating body fat percentage, 1 inch to the right of the umbilicus. The right side depicts the end of the scan. The first consistent white band of signal represents the fascia separating the superficial and deep adipose layers. The second, thicker band of white signal is the actual fat muscle interface. Now, note that if we drag a small rectangle from the center of this fat muscle interface to the top of the image, the total fat thickness or subcutaneous fat is measured automatically and displayed here. It also coincides strongly with the initial site point measurement we did in the Measure tab. One thing to note here is that the depth scale for measuring site points only goes to a maximum of 60 millimeters. It's possible that extremely sedentary or obese clients potentially exceed 60 millimeters, and the actual fat muscle interface signal is difficult to detect. The solution is to perform a waist scan because the depth can be adjusted to capture the tissue, and the scan measurement can then be transferred to the measure point in the formula, as we'll demonstrate now. Again, When we drag a rectangle from the fat muscle interface to the top of the image, total fat thickness is displayed along with a To Measure button. Clicking on this button brings up a window where you're asked if you'd like to transfer the measurement to the waist point. From the drop-down menu, select the waist point. And if we navigate back to the Measure tab, you can see the measurement was transferred. You have the option of transferring scan measurements to any point within your body composition formula if you like. Scans offer definitive proof, much like an X-ray image, so if there's ever any doubt with regard to measuring site points, image scans can be rendered as a means of verification if necessary, or if the fat muscle interface signal is beyond 60 millimeters when taking a site point measurement on obese individuals. We can also track the various interfaces and quantify both the superficial and the deep adipose tissue layers. Click the Track Interface button and place your cursor in the center of the fascia signal, then click. You can adjust the tracking by setting your own data points by moving your cursor to the desired area and clicking again. Once you're satisfied with the tracking, click the Stop Tracking button. We have now quantified the superficial adipose tissue layer from the top of the image to the fascia. Next, let's track the actual fat muscle interface signal here at about 13 millimeters and adjust it as needed. Remember, we want to track these interfaces in the center of the signal as much as possible. The layer between the two red tracking markers represents deep adipose tissue, or DAT. Deep adipose tissue is virtually identical to visceral fat in terms of insulin resistance, reflecting elevated risk levels for diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. At the end of the day, any amount of DAT is potentially dangerous, and the ability to monitor and see changes in these layers will help you understand your actual progress and overall health. Notice that we see a third white interface signal band here, which represents the end of the rectus abdominis muscle. You can track that as well to quantify muscle thickness. Below this last tracking marker is the abdominal cavity. As mentioned previously, you can save these images and compare changes in adipose layers. This brings us to the end of our training. You can click on the Home tab to return to your Welcome to BodyView Personal page. If you require additional support, please contact us at 925-606-7044 or by email at support@intellimetrics.com. Thank you.